After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. And may the Lord add his blessing to understanding of these words.
Well, good morning, Bethany Christian Church. It's not straight. Good morning. Welcome to Bethany Christian Church, friends, family, guests, everybody in between those titles. It's good to have you here this morning. Thank you for those of you who are joining us online. Good morning. Happy New Year. Yeah, we made it somehow. It's 2026. Every time I write the date on a piece of paper, I'm going to mess it up and write 5 and then have to do that weird thing where you turn a 5 into a 6. You know, does anybody else do that? Or just me? Okay, very good. I'm not alone. Isn't it funny? It's like the first, I don't know, I feel like it's like the first quarter of the year I have to practice that, but yeah, it is what it is. Well, as you can tell, we are talking about these handsome fellas up here today. I like that. I wonder why one of them is riding a camel. You know, apparently they were wealthy, so maybe they sold their camels for the gold and frankincense. Could be it. But yes, welcome everybody. We are celebrating Epiphany today, and thank you to those of you who have contributed your white-clad gifts today to celebrate the Magi and the shepherds visiting Jesus. And with that in mind, let us bow our heads and let us pray. God of light and leading, today we remember the strangers from the east who saw a star, packed their bags, and set out on a road they did not fully understand. As we witness your word today, shine your light on our path. Where we have settled in and grown comfortable, stir us again to follow. Where fear keeps us from taking the next step, give us courage. Where we cling too tightly to our own treasures, teach us to open our hands. By your Spirit, guide us, as surely as you guided the Magi, until we find ourselves kneeling in the presence of Jesus. We ask all these things in his most holy and matchless name. Amen. You know, I was singing the 12 Days of Christmas to myself on my way here this morning, and I kept saying 12 Lords a-leaping. I don't know the words to the song clearly. I was a little embarrassed to hear Anna let us know what they all were. And I was like, no, it's 10 Lords a-leaping. I was like, I knew that little argument in my head meant something. But that's okay, it's okay. Dave, did you get all the answers? Okay. Puzzle Man did not get all the answers, so if you didn't, don't feel bad. But well done, yes. The 12 points to the Apostles' Creed, I would have never in my wildest dreams understood or gotten that one. That was good. I kept yelling, "Oh, it's the tribes of Israel," and Anna was like, "Shush. You're wrong." But yes, the 12th day of Christmas. We'll be there in a couple days. And you'll probably see this week that lights are starting to come down. Trees are on the curb. Everybody's kind of getting back into the swing of things. And if the trees aren't on the curb, they're probably doing what I did one time. When I was a younger man, I used to lead high school students, and I was a youth minister, but I wasn't a youth minister. I was part of a parachurch organization, but we went over to this one student's house one year, and he said, "I've got a bunch of Christmas trees." It's like, okay, great, Christmas trees. He says, "We're gonna light them on fire." I was like, cool. Like, I'm 19, that sounds like fun. And so, like, this guy's got his family's house has like a fire pit in the back, and we're standing the Christmas tree on end and just like watching it go up in flames. And incredible, you know, if you were young once and you like to watch fire, like I do, you'll understand my excitement about telling this story. But the thing I got a little nervous about is that for some silly reason, they built a fire pit underneath a big tree. And so the flames are literally like, I kid you not, probably going 15, 20 feet in the air, just from one probably maybe 8-foot Christmas tree. And we were doing this multiple times. Like, I think we like started with the small trees and went to the large trees. And then by the time we got to those big trees, I looked up and I saw that tree that was like, you know, felt like it all the way over there was actually hanging right over this burning Christmas tree. And I hate to tell you, like, I don't have any crazy, like, we lit the whole house on fire story, but it was nerve-wracking, and it definitely put you on edge, so Happy New Year. So they might not be on the curb because, you know, college students are helping high school students light them on fire. Yes, and it is in our church calendar today. This is a big pivot. It is in our church calendar today that we remember that the Magi have finally arrived after a long journey. And we learn something from this, that Christmas is not just a birth story. It's not just a birth story. Jesus is born. The light of the world comes into our world. God breaks into a part of our history and does some really incredible things. But what happens before he does all those incredible things? Well, a couple of guys, we say 3. The text doesn't say 3. We just happen to say it because there's 3 gifts. A couple of guys from somewhere way out east show up at this kid's doorstep to wish him well on his way. Kind of a weird thing, right? It's funny because we get a birth story in chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, we immediately jump into people bringing the king gifts. An unlikely king, some gifts. And that's because Christmas isn't just a birth announcement. It's a summons. It's a summons. The Magi show us what it looks like to be summoned. The Magi show us what it looks like to be moved because of Christmas. Not just to celebrate it, but to be moved. And they literally move. You know, I heard a sermon actually on my way to church this morning. And I don't listen to sermons on the radio, but I just happened to be listening to a sermon on the radio. Normally and yes, I actually do listen to the radio. I know I look like I'm, 15, but I love FM. It's great. The commercials are hilarious and irritating. And, there's just something about reliving the 90s and 2000s that is really nice. But I was listening to a sermon on the radio, and normally I don't. But this guy is talking about the story that we're talking about today. And he said something kind of interesting. He said, you can read the text. I don't need to read it again for you. But the details of the text don't say anything about how many magi showed up, how many pounds of gold, how many this or that or the other thing. They just show up with gifts. And we like to remember them as these cute old guys on the felt right here. But we don't know that they were cute old guys. They might have been young men. And so he said, this year I took a risk. I decided to think of the Magi as these young people. And if you know anything about young people, We don't have a lot of resources when we're young people. And so if these magi were young people, he liked to imagine that they went through a lot of hoops to get to Jesus, right? Instead of having all the wealth accumulated over years of being wise and reading the stars and whatever it is that they did. Well, these are some new astrologers on the scene. And they sold all their things because they knew that there was something special about this star that showed up in the sky. They said, I'm going to take a risk here. I'm going to sell what I have to buy some gifts, take a journey to see the King of Kings. It's really interesting. He says Scripture doesn't tell us their age or their backstory, but we know that whoever they were, this journey cost them something. To put it in kind of today's terms, faith isn't like Amazon. It doesn't come with free shipping. Okay? It doesn't come with free shipping. So let's walk with the Magi for a bit and see what their faith actually looked like. Starting in verse 1, it says, After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. And they asked, Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. Notice these guys, they don't get a systematic theology. They don't get the Apostles' Creed. They're from the East. They probably don't even know what the Jewish religion is about. And they show up because they got a star. We typically remember these cute old guys on the felt as astrologers, people who read the stars and discern the truths about the universe. Now, I'm not super into that. I know some of us like to look at our horoscopes, but that's what these guys were doing. That's what they got paid the big bucks to do. They don't get a systematic theology. They see a new star in the sky, and maybe it's twinkling a little brighter. Maybe it's speaking something to their heart in the position that they were in whatever context that they lived out east. And to them, they read it as some kind of prophecy. And I don't know if it was in a dream, if it was a stirring in their hearts, but they understood this to be a sign, a rumor that a king was to come. And so they have this little light in the sky. And it's with that little light that they move. They move with just the little light that they have. And they probably know that star is a far ways off. I'm not standing directly beneath it. So it's probably going to be a long journey. They're going to take a long time away from home, away from their friends and family, away from probably lucrative job that they have reading the stars. They're going to have expenses. They're going to have danger. They're going to run into probably bandits. They're going to run into cruddy weather. Anybody ever been hiking for a few days? I know you have, right? You ever go hiking, set out, and you're like, weather's going to be great. And you get to day 3 and it's pouring rain, and you're like, why am I out here? And then you remember, you're like, embrace the suck, right? Yeah, you know that one. They like to say that in the military. It's a good time. It makes everything that's not fun really fun. But they go and they encounter danger on the road. They probably encounter bandits, or they at least risk bandits. They risk bad weather. They risk getting sick. And they didn't have doctors like you and I have today, the miracle workers we have today, let's call it what it is, or the miracle working nurses. But they believe it enough. They see this star, they see this small light in the sky, and they believe it enough to rearrange their entire lives. I like how this pastor this morning was thinking about it in terms of young people, because he said, well, they didn't have any resources, and they went and bought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Some of the most valuable stuff there is at the time in this world. And they went on a long journey, a risky journey, to go follow a small light. They rearrange their lives. And you notice something. Their faith, the faith that they display in taking this long journey, is not well, I agree with an idea. That systematic theology, that sounds good. That thing, that Apostles' Creed, it makes sense. No, don't do that at all. It's not an idea they're agreeing with. Their faith looks like, I'm packing my bags. I'm getting on the road. Getting on the road. I was actually watching Lord of the Rings last night. And Bilbo Baggins, every time he tells Frodo when he's about to go out the door, what does he say? Do y'all remember? My two Lord of the Rings fanatics? He says, every time you walk out the door, if you don't keep your feet, there's no telling where you'll be swept off to. Right? Did I get that one right? Close enough. I did that one from memory. But there's no telling. You're leaning into the danger because you have faith that there's a king at the end of that journey. So it begs the question, where have you been waiting for more certainty instead of moving with the light that you already have? What would it look like to treat what you already know of Jesus as worth packing your bags, stepping out the door, trying to keep your feet? Verse 3. When King Herod heard, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all of the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. They replied, in Bethlehem in Judea, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and make careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. What a snake. Well, like I said earlier, right? So the obvious place for the Magi following this star to stop in search of a king is where? The palace, the capital, where Herod is hanging out. And they walk into the orbit of a violent ruler. A violent ruler. They don't know yet that Herod is a killer. But they are bringing news of a new king into the court of the old king. And they didn't know that this was the risky business that they were on, but this is what they're doing. They're saying, yeah, we followed this star. I had a dream, a vision, a feeling, an intuition that there was a king being born. And so I figured I'd come here, because that's where kings are born. And Herod's like, well, I haven't had a kid lately. At least not that I know about. This is a politically dangerous move. This is frankly, they don't even know it, but they're probably at risk of harm. And then Herod, in his wisdom, his earthly wisdom, says, yeah, why don't you go check that out for me? And when you see him, come on back so that I can go and see him. Snake. Herod tries to recruit them. Go and search diligently and bring word when you find him. Notice what faith did for the wise men, the Magi. It put them in rooms where their allegiance was tested. Their allegiance to a king they had not even met yet. They're going to be co-opted by Herod? Well, we know the end of the story. No. Will they serve the old order or the new king? We know the end of the story. No. They don't fully understand the threat that they just encountered, right? But they're already taking a risk by asking this question out loud. I think what this teaches us is that following Jesus will put us into proximity to power. Following Jesus will put us in proximity to our bosses, to those who rule over the systems that govern our lives. It'll put us near the expectations of others. It's going to put us near powers that don't want to share control with us. So the question for them as they leave this place, the question for us in our day and age is, who am I really serving? Who am I really serving? Verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. I just got to say, that's pretty cool. I've never followed a star anyplace, but if I saw a star stop in the sky and it's been moving, that's pretty cool. Verse 10. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. This shows us that faith is willing to pay a cost. We talked about in the beginning how these magi gave up whatever livelihood they had before to make a long journey to find this rumored king who was to be born. They gave up their livelihoods. They probably had to sell a great deal in order to purchase gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And that cost sits together with joy. Verse 10 says, when they saw the star, they were what? Overjoyed. Overjoyed. Joy and cost sit together. The text, it stacks these verbs. They rejoice. They go. They kneel. They open. They give. There's joy and cost in both of these things. Their gifts are expensive, right? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These aren't somebody's leftovers. These are serious, expensive gifts that are life-changing that these men who traveled from afar off, with all the costs of their journey, brought to the king. And like we said, cost is not just those gifts. It's lost time where they could be at home. It's travel expenses. It's selling things to fund the trip. It's just like what that pastor said this morning. Imagine if they were young guys. They had to give up a lot in order to do this. There's a social cost. Yeah, I'm going to walk west with my friends and my camel. You're going where? You've got such a good business going here. You tell us how to read the stars. You're going where? Jerusalem? Why? You're going where? To see a baby you've never met? Why? You're going where? Because of a star? Wasn't even there before. What's it got to teach us? Going where? I think what's really interesting is before the Magi even know, they're acting out love for this king. Love that doesn't cost you anything probably isn't love yet. It's a preference. Preferences are easy. I can prefer things. On the days where Brianna is like the greatest human on earth for me, maybe extraordinary to everyone too, but those days, I can love her out of preference. But on the days where she is worked a 96-hour week at the hospital And I'm not exaggerating, she's done it. She's worked a 96-hour week at the hospital. She happens to be pregnant. She hasn't eaten. She's tired, she's grouchy. That's the day that love cost me something. Because I love her, understanding that she's probably treating me like, not so great because of the external circumstances she's going through that day. Love costs me something in that. Love cost these magi something. And their worship is not just a feeling. It's not just a, God, I love you. Jesus, this new King of Kings, I love you. No. They literally physically manifested their love for that person, for our God. They boxed up gold, frankincense, and myrrh and walked it, probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles, to lay it at his feet. It cost them something. Those young guys, if that's who they were, we don't know if they pawned their heirlooms or emptied their savings accounts, but we do know this. Whether they were young or old, the worship that they did that day, it left a mark on their bank account. It was a real sacrifice for them. And so it begs the question, if we are followers of that same Prince of Peace, that same King of Kings, the same baby who was born in a manger some 2,000 years ago, what does following Jesus ever cost us? Has it ever cost us? And I'm not just talking about like you spending money on whatever. I'm saying in your relationship to God, have you ever made a sacrifice? Has God ever said, hey, I want something greater for you in your life, but you're going to have to give up, fill in the blank? Has your relationship to Jesus ever cost you time? You actually spend the time in silence in the morning listening to God's voice? Have you ever spent the time to talk to the person who was on the streets and didn't have a home to go to? Did you take time to actually look at them, to acknowledge them, to love them? Has following Jesus ever cost you your reputation? God says, I need you to take this leap of faith, but you're going to look like an idiot. People are going to hate you for it. You're going to look crazy. Has following Jesus ever cost you money? I don't know. It cost them money. Has it ever cost you comfort? I feel like we have this idea in the church that being a good Christian means being comfortable. And a lot of you shook your head when I said that. A lot of you shook your head when I said that. But if we think about the ways in which we live our lives, what story is our life telling about that question? Are we comfortable? Or is God calling us to be a little uncomfortable? So what's one treasure? What's one treasure that you've been clutching, that you've been holding on to, that might actually belong at the feet of Jesus? And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. The Magi have come to do what they came to do. They brought their gifts, their livelihoods, condensed into a physical form, and they put it at the king's feet. They did what they came to do. But the story isn't over. God speaks again. It says that God speaks to them in a dream. Maybe they spent a couple days hanging out with Jesus and Mary and Joseph. I don't know. But God comes to them in a dream. They have more information now. Herod is not to be trusted. He's a snake. He's a snake. He doesn't want to come worship Jesus. He wants to make sure that nobody's taken over his kingdom. And what do? They get this dream and they follow it. They obey. You want to put it in those words. There's no fanfare. There's no dialogue. They just decide to take a different road home. And this obedience, this following of this encouragement they got in this dream, it protects. It protects the child, protects themselves, and it protects the integrity of their worship. Right? We learn that faith is not a one-time decision. It's actually ongoing. It's ongoing responsiveness to the way that God is speaking to us. For these guys in their life, it began with a moment. I believe God works in moments. The moment began when they saw a star in the sky. Maybe they had a feeling in their bones. Maybe they heard something audibly spoken to them that they were to go meet the king. I don't know. But then it led them to the next moment where they had to make risks. They had to sell their things. They had to bring gifts. They had to avoid bad weather. They probably got rained on a little bit. And then they finally made it. Maybe they lost some of their friends along the way because bandits hit them. Who knows? Maybe the gifts that they had brought didn't all make it. But they came to the feet of Jesus. And then they leave in response to a dream that they had. Faith is not a one-time decision in their life. It's not a one-time decision in your life or my life. It is an ongoing response to the call that God has placed on you and on me. And sometimes God honors your sacrifice by changing your route. The reward is not that they just saw the child, but that God now entrusts them with part of the story of God himself coming into this world. God now entrusts them with the protection of the Christ child by their obedience. What a gift. What a gift. Where is God asking you to go home by a different road? For some of you, it may be a different pattern in your marriage. You've probably got a lot of good patterns. A lot of you have been married a long time. Some of you may have some bad patterns. Or some of you have good patterns that are keeping you from great patterns. Is God asking you in your marriage to go home by a different road? What would that look like? Maybe it's a different way of handling money. Maybe you really like having your daily Starbucks. But God says, I really want you to commit that daily Starbucks money to something else. Maybe it's to feeding the poor. Maybe it's to saving something. I actually had a friend I want to tell you about. His name's Lyle, and Lyle and his wife have a blessing fund where they take money every single month and they put it into a separate bank account that is untouchable until God says, you're going to take that $10,000 and give someone a car. And it's not like he's not rich. Dude's a minister. He used to work in D.C. He lives in Atlanta now. Love the guy to death. But he and his wife just very consistently say, this part of our tithe money goes into this account. And he's told me some of the stories. It's insane what he and his family have done for some people. But it's just because they are faithful in that small way, taking Starbucks money. Maybe God is calling you to a different way of responding to conflict. I'm not always the best at conflict. A lot of us are either combatants or we're avoiders. We don't want to have that hard conversation. I'm an avoider. I hate having hard conversation. Unless it's people who are really close to me, in which case I'm like, nah, we're going to settle this right here, right now, and you're not leaving the room until we get it done. But sometimes I have to relax a little bit because I want to hash it out and figure it out right now and have everything honky-dory, but sometimes the other person's not ready for that. So that's a different road home for me sometimes. Maybe God is asking you to respond to conflict differently. Or perhaps it's, as we begin a new year, a different path for this season of life that's upon us. I notice, and what I learned from these magi today is that fresh obedience is the fruit of a real encounter. Fresh obedience is the fruit of a real encounter with God. It's not the price of admission. Can't put the cart before the horse. Obedience is the fruit of a real encounter with the Spirit of the living God. Can't be obedient to something you've never experienced, to someone you've never experienced. All right, let's land this plane. I'm keeping you all here long enough, huh? So what do the Magi teach us on the 12th day of Christmas? Well, number one, they moved on limited light. They moved on limited light. There was a star in the sky. I don't know how bright it was, but it definitely wasn't lighting up the whole world. They moved on limited light. We learn that faith travels before it has all the answers. Wouldn't be a leap of faith if you didn't have to jump, right? Number two, they risked proximity to power. They risked proximity to power. They had to go see Herod. Following a star, there's a king somewhere. Where do you go? Go to the palace. They risked that. They don't know what they're walking into. That whole place could be in hysterics right now. He could be chopping everybody's heads off. Who knows? I'm not a king from the, turn of the century. But they risked proximity to power. But we watched that their faith kept allegiance to the true king. Their faith kept allegiance to the true king. Number three, they paid a cost. They paid a cost. Faith gives treasure. True faith, abundant faith, real, intimate faith in God gives our treasure, not just the leftovers. It gives our treasure, not spare change. And number four, they allowed God to reroute their journey. Maybe they had planned to stick in town and live there for the rest of their days under the tutelage of Jesus Christ the King. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were planning to go back and talk to Herod and be like, hey man, found the king, you want to come check him out? They received in a dream that God told them, I'm rerouting your journey. You're going to go home, but you're going to find a different way to do it. It's instructive because it tells us that faith keeps listening after a big spiritual moment. I've had mountaintop experiences in my faith. I'm sure you have too. But true faith will continue to listen when we're in the valley, when we're on the plain, and while we're climbing that next mountain. So on the 12th day of Christmas, as we move to pack away the season of Christmas, maybe the Spirit's inviting you to move. I've got 3 questions. What is one step you need to take? One journey that you've been putting off because you want more certainty than God ever promised? What is one step you need to take? A journey you've been putting off because you want more certainty than God ever promised? Number 2, what is one gift? Time, money, presents, forgiveness? What is one gift that you know you're holding on to that belongs at Jesus' feet? And number 3, where is God asking you to go home a different way? Where is God asking you to go home a different way? The good news is, the faith of the Magi, your faith, when you follow through, is not wasted. The Magi found what they were looking for, and some, right? The same God who honors their costly faith will honor your costly faith. He still guides. He still warns. He still meets those who are willing to travel. Let us pray. Jesus, we thank you for those wise travelers who followed a star and found a child, who risked the journey, celebrated in worship, and opened their treasures at the feet of that child. We confess that we often want a faith that costs us very little, that does not disturb our routines or touch our comfort. Forgive us when we stay put, instead of following where you might lead. Today, God, we ask for faith of the Magi, faith that is willing to move when light is scarce, faith that will risk asking hard questions, even in the presence of power, faith that offers you more than our leftovers, faith that listens for your voice and is willing to go home by a different road. Lord, I ask that you would show each of us one concrete step for us this week, one gift to lay down, one different road you are inviting us to take. And all God's people said, amen.